Okay, now we're going to talk about half-shell oysters. Selection of oysters is very important, and these are the ones that we picked out at the store. I brought them in here and I put them on ice, and the important thing is to understand the architecture of an oyster. It has a cup on the bottom and then a plate on the top. So you can see there's a deep section here. The oyster needs the seawater in that in order to live. And so you never want to pick an oyster that has been stored upside down. And you want to, the whole idea here with a lot of seafood, and this is certainly no exception, is this guy's actually alive. We're going to eat them when they're still alive. That's what we're going to do here. So we need for it to be fresh. Oysters will last in this condition with some ice as much as a week if they're in good shape when you buy them. One of the ways you can tell is sometimes an oyster will open up, but if you tap it, then it'll close, you know that it's alive. And if that doesn't happen, then you have to discard that oyster. So all of these, because we just jostled them around, are all closed up nice and tight, and I'm pretty sure when we get in there we're going to see that they're pretty nice. The other thing is that the oyster should be round. If you have an oyster that's elongated, that's because it's not getting enough to eat. And the whole idea here is that we want fat, plump oysters that have a lot of glycogen. And oysters don't store fat, they store glycogen, and glycogen is sweet. So the more nutritious the environment, the better these oysters are going to taste. That's the reason why our best oysters come in the winter, and they also come from higher latitudes. So the oysters in the Gulf of Mexico are very bland because they don't have enough to eat, and the ones up in Canada are much sweeter. Now, the reason for that is that oxygen is more soluble when the water's cold. That means a lot of plankton, a lot of grills, microscopic shrimp, all kinds of stuff for the oysters to eat. They also ideally need sunlight, so they need to be on a beach or in some environment where the sunlight can get through. And so you often see them in tidal basins. You don't want them too close together. If they are too close together, where they're trying to get more yield from that beach, then the oysters will be elongated. They won't be getting nutrition, and they won't be soft and sweet. They're going to be stringy and kind of bland. So that's the basics on oysters. There are many different types. These here are called Pacific oysters, or also Japonicus, because they're from Japan. We'll see on the East Coast lots of other kinds, the blue points, and the ones that I like best are the European flat oyster, or the so-called belons that you get. They actually have gentlemen divers on the beaches of Maine that find these wild belons, or European flat. Belon's a place in France, so they aren't really belons, but they are that same type of oyster, and they grow in cold water, and they have the very soulful flavor to them. But anyway, let's just stick with these Japonicus, Pacific oysters. There's another variety that's a whole lot smaller called a Kumamoto. It's just a midget Japonicus. All right, now the oyster has a clamp that holds it tight, and it's right about there. We're going to open the oyster by inserting a knife right in the back here where the hinge is, and try to pop that open. Then we're going to cut the top and bottom of the hinge and try to preserve as much of the liquid as we can. Then we're going to put them over here into some ice. When you do this, you know, there's a whole lot of oyster knives on the market. I hate almost all of them. The little short pointy thing with the shield, that's not really an oyster knife, but this is the one that I recommend you get, and it has a nice little point there. It's very easy to get in there and do the thing. If you're doing this for the first time, you want to have some protection. There are a lot of gloves you can get. I'm using here just a pot holder that has a pocket in it. And that's going to work just fine. And you may even want to wrap a towel around the oyster to hold it down. You basically don't want to push through the oyster and then stab your hand. So anyway, I'm just going to do it this way, and you just kind of fool around till you kind of work your way in like this. There it is. There it is. So it just gave way, gave up the ghost, so to speak, and now I pop the shell open left and right, and there we go. Now that thing is loose, and I have to go in here. I have to know that right there is where the valve is, or the muscle that holds the thing together. I need to cut that just like so. Now, guys that are good at this, they do all of that in 2 seconds. And I know how to do it, but I'm not that fast. That's okay. So here we're going to take the top off, and see, I cut through that muscle right there. Got a little bit left on the top here. That's all right. We're going to keep that too, so we just scrape it off and add it. So then, in order to eat this thing, we're going to need to cut the bottom, the other part of the valve, and that's right here. Just cut through there. This isn't a sharp knife, but it does kind of hurt when you shove it into your hand. So that's it. And you can see it's nice and moist. One of the things to note is that these are oysters from May. So what happens is when the water is cold, you have all this oxygen solubility, but in May, it's the first month it doesn't have an R in it, but it's still a good time, actually the best time to get oysters, because what happens is the water warms up, and that's going to make the oysters spawn. But we got them just before the spawning point, and that's when they have the richest flavor. In the summertime, they're trying to reproduce, and so they have this spawning stuff that's kind of gross. So people like to get them before that happens. If you do have a spawning oyster, I have a recipe for something I invented called Oysters Nouveau-Riche, and it's just a way to barbecue. What you do is you take your spawning oyster and you wrap a little bacon or pancetta around it and do it on the grill, and then you bring it out and you spoon some creamed spinach underneath it. And I gotta tell you, these are, you have a grill full of those. It takes about an hour to put it together, and it disappears in about 10 seconds if you have a crowd around. So anyway, let's do another one. And then I'm arranging them on this platter or bowl, a flat bowl full of ice. So they'll go all around the outside here. Let me just pop another one of these to just demonstrate it again. I'm looking to find that little hinge, working my way in, pressing pretty hard. And now we're in. So we go up against the top and slice to the right. And that should open it up. Okay, that's got it. So now it should come loose. Oysters are always right-handed, so it's always over there. It's never over here. And now we should have it. There we go. Now that one was perfect. got just about all the meat there, and then I'm just going to go down here. Here's, again, it's that muscle, and we cut underneath it, and that frees the whole oyster up. All right. Now, so we'll just be placing these around. I want to show you some of the things that people like to put on oysters. The most popular, this is basically ketchup and horseradish. It's a cocktail sauce, and it's easy to find in any store. So you put a little bit of that on there, and it actually covers the taste a little bit. But oysters are not acidic. They're sort of high pH. People will put lemon on them in order to kind of cut through that very heavy, rich flavor that they have. This is a more delicate approach. It's called a mignonette, which literally means cute sauce. And what it is a very light red wine vinegar with shallots, or in this case I used scallions. I might just put a little tiny bit of that in there, but for me, if you have good oysters, you don't need any of that stuff. And I just like them just the way they are. And I want to mention that here's another very light vinegar that you can get. This is a seasoned rice wine vinegar, and it's not terribly sour. It's slightly sweetened. I really like that with an oyster as well. What I like to use to go along with is this very soft acidity. So it functions like a lemon, but it's not as dominant, and it's a little richer. And I can't wait to try these two together. So. Saint Laurent is an Austrian variety. It's named after Saint Lawrence, who was martyred on August 10th, 286 AD. He was a pope, basically, and they killed him and on August 10th. And so it used to be that we picked all the grapes on the saints' days, and most of the saints' days we pick on are later on in the year. August 10th is a very early harvest. It doesn't have very much alcohol, and it has a fair amount of acidity. And so I think this combination is going to be something really special. So again, performing the same function as very light acidity. Okay, so let's see what we got here. Oh man. Oysters, they're said to be an aphrodisiac. The reason they say that is that it has a lot of zinc, and so if a man is zinc deficient, oysters are kind of good for his libido, I guess. But there is so much richer flavor in a raw oyster than you ever get when you cook it. It's like tasting the sea. And these particular ones, just as I had hoped, are very sweet with that glycogen in there. So that's a real treat.